Yeah.
Sorry.
Come on, guys. Good evening. Today is our yearly. Yearly Truth in Taxation meeting. The date is December 12th, 2023, and Sherry Thompson will be taking things off. So,
Great. Thank you. So yes, this is our public hearing for taxes. This is for taxes, property taxes that are payable in 2024. Minnesota state law does require that school districts hold a public hearing. It needs to be between November 25th and December 28th, and it has to be at 6 p.m. or later. It can be part of a regularly scheduled board meeting. We also allow time for public comment at the end, and we may adopt, the board may adopt rather, the final levy at the same meeting, and our board will be adopting the final levy at the regular meeting following the presentation. So we're going to talk a little bit on current year budget and then our proposed tax levy for taxes payable in 2024. We're going to talk a little bit about background information on school funding because it's always very interesting, or at least to bean counters like me. We'll touch on the district's budget. We'll talk about the proposed tax levy for property taxes payable in 2024, and again, we will allow for public comment. The Minnesota legislature sets the funding for Minnesota public schools. So not only does the legislature set, are they required to set the amount for as far as school districts or funding formulas, but they also determine how those funds come in, what portion comes from the state and what comes from local property tax dollars. As I said, the state sets the formula. There is tax policy for local schools. Again, that is determined by the state, and there's a maximum authorized property tax levy. And when I say that, it's not like we don't have a wish list. We don't look at our budget and determine that we need X amount of dollars to make our budget balance. It's all determined, much of it's determined by student enrollment or our anticipated enrollment. So that is what is driven. That's really what drives our funding. Or also we can go to our taxpayers and get authorization for additional funding, which the district has done in the past. The state also authorizes the board, as I said, to submit referendums for to our voters for approval, but the spending does not necessarily align to the funding that's coming in. Again, it's highly regulated, and we do not develop a wish list. Our basic general education formula, that's the majority of the funding that we receive through the state. That has been lagging, as in not keeping up pace with inflation for the last 20 years. We were awarded by the legislature an increase of 4% in the current year over last year. That was approved by the legislature in 2023. That's a very large increase compared to what we've seen in the last 20 years. And then next year, we will see an increase. So for 24-25 school year, we'll see an increase of 2%, or about $143 per pupil over the current year. So that gives us a total for 24-25. Our basic funding formula will be $7,281. It would have to increase, and I've got a chart I'll show you, by another $1,356 for it to keep up with inflation over the last 20 years. And you can see by this chart here, the blue line, the top line, is taking that funding formula going back to 2003 and adjusting it for inflation. And the red dotted line shows the actual increase in the funding formula over the years. So even with a large increase that we have seen, that we're seeing this year, we're still lagging quite a bit. We also have challenges. We've talked about this whenever we talk about our budget, the underfunding of special education. Excuse me. In fiscal year 2022, statewide, the special education was underfunded by $712 million. In Roseville schools alone, we were underfunded by $12 million. With new legislation and improvements in funding, we are closing that gap, but we still have underfunding by about $408 million statewide. We're anticipating, and we won't know until the current year is complete, we are anticipating that we'll be underfunded in Roseville schools by about $8 to $9 million this year. These are obviously important programs that our kids deserve, so we invest in those programs, but we need to take those resources from the other general fund or the remaining general fund to subsidize these programs. I also want to point out that a change in the tax levy doesn't necessarily relate directly to a change in our budget. The tax levy, and we'll talk more about this, is based on many state-determined funding formulas, plus voter-approved referendums. Some increases in tax levies are revenue neutral. So, for instance, we can have an increase in what comes to us in property taxes, but the legislature could offset that with a reduction in funds that come in state aid. Our expenditure budget is limited by state set revenue formulas, voter-approved levies, and our fund balance. So if we have excess reserves or an excess fund balance, we can dip into that, as we have from time to time, to fund our programs. But we do not receive funding that's equal to our expenditures. An increase in school taxes does not always correlate to an equal increase in the budget. There are many factors that also impact the taxes. I also would like to point out that there is a difference in local government levy cycles. For instance, the school district runs on a fiscal year that runs from July 1st through June 30th. Similar to the school year, cities and counties, they have a budget year that begins January 1st and runs through December 31st. So while we are working, and we started working on these calculations last summer, it's built, again, based on a lot of estimates. So the 2024 taxes will provide funding for 2024, 2025. So we're estimating enrollment and other expenses a year before the fiscal year even begins, because the budget, the tax levy and the budget will be adopted in June the levy will be adopted tonight, but it will be funding the 24-25 school year. Cities and counties are they worked on their budget this fall, and that they will receive funding for their programs or their fiscal year that starts on January 1st. So we've got a little bit of a lag. School district budgets are divided into separate funds, and it's based on the purposes of the revenue and the programs that are included. As I mentioned, there is a lag of 6 months. So we're going to talk a little bit on the budget. We're going to talk about this year rather than next year. Our district's funds, the biggest fund is our general fund. That really covers the majority of our day-to-day operations. Excuse me. We also have a food service fund. So that the food service fund is where we fund our meal programs. That includes breakfast, lunch, and a snack program or a light dinner program. So all of our meals are funded through community service or through food service. Community service is our community education programs. While we receive some state aid and then also some local property taxes, community service is also funded in a great deal by fees. Fees for childcare, fees for classes. So there are a lot of fee-funded programs in community service. We also have a building construction fund. We have a debt service fund, and we use debt service. And then also OPEB debt service, that's post-employment benefits debt service. That's how we pay off whenever we borrow money, whether it be for bonding. We've had some bonding with our building construction in recent years. So paying those debts off all flow through debt service. We have an internal service fund, and in the case of Roseville schools, we are self-insured on our dental program. So we fund all of our dental claims and administrative costs. We fund that through what's referred to as an internal service fund. Our OPEB trust is a trust that was established back in 2009, and that was to pay off some of the old severance and benefit type programs that are no longer in place. So we are in the process of drawing that down and wrapping that program up within the next 10 years. So here's a copy, just kind of looking, and again, and this is based on estimates. We're just finalizing our audit. But if we look at our general, this breaks out between our general fund, and then we have what's referred to as a restricted fund. So that includes some of our long-term facility maintenance, operating capital, and a few other items that are mandated spending. We are anticipating that we're going to end the year with about $3.2 million. Our general our other funds in the general fund, we're estimating there that we would end the year with about $7.1 million. Our food service fund, $3.9 million, and our community service fund, about $2.6 million. You can see we've got all the other funds listed there. Again, a lot of times I focus on the general fund because it is the biggest fund. And then looking at the current year, moving to the right with the red columns, we are anticipating that we are going to further build that our fund balance up in the general fund in the current year that we're in right now. So looking at estimating about an $8.7 million fund balance for June 30th of 2024. So looking at overall our revenue, our general fund alone includes revenue of about $130 million. Again, that's like 75% of the total budget. Our overall total revenue in all funds is just shy of $174 million. Our building construction, right now we're really working on a lot of long-term facility maintenance, bigger projects there, and that's what the majority of that building construction is. And we're receiving about $14 million on that right now annually. That varies a little bit from anywhere from 11 to $15 million a year. The debt service, as I mentioned, that's where we have to pay off debt when we finance, and that's 8% of our budget, and then some other smaller components. So talk a little bit more about the general fund, again, because that is our biggest fund. 72% of our revenue this year will come from the state. That comes in the form of state aid. Local is our property taxes. So that's 21%. That includes also some other fees. And then our federal is about 7%. What I would like to point out is typically our federal funds run anywhere from 4 to 5%. We are in the final year, the 23-24 year. We are in the final year of receiving funds, our COVID pandemic funds. So we'll see that in 24-25. We'll see that percentage in the federal dollars. That will decrease and go back to probably like 4%. Looking at our expenditures, if you look at the combination of salary and wages and our employee benefits, that's almost 80% of our budget. We are in the people business, so that is where we spend the majority of our funds, is on staffing. Another large category, and we've seen some increase there, is our purchase services. Purchase services includes the costs we pay for our transportation. We have a contractor that we pay for transportation. This also includes tuition that we pay out, whether it goes to an intermediate district or other school districts, for tuition to provide services to our students if we can't provide them here. And in addition, we have, during the last couple of years, we have had to shift some of our salary wages to purchase services because we've struggled a little bit in some of our staffing and some of our specialty areas, like our special education teachers, some of our specialists, some of our nurses. So we've seen that purchase service category bump up a little bit as we had to contract some of that work out. Our supplies and materials is about 4%, and then our capital expenditures is 1.3%, and when you see that other, that's some of like our property and our liability insurance. Looking then at our instruction or our expenses by program, we spend the majority of our dollars, which we should, on direct student services. So you will see that we have a regular instruction, just our general education regular instruction costs, and the majority of this again is salary and benefits. 38% is on regular instruction. We also have vocational education, career tech instruction, and that's 1%. Our special education instruction is 22.3%. So we are at like 64% just in direct instruction. In addition to that, we have what's called instructional support services. That includes our media specialists, curriculum development. It also includes some of our additional support, our paraprofessionals, support in the classroom. So that's about 8%. Our pupil support services includes things like our transportation costs, our guidance counselors, and our nurses. So that's another 12.7% or $16 million. And then we have costs for our sites and buildings, that being our buildings and grounds staff and our utilities, and that's about 8.7%. Our district support services, that includes things like human resources, the business office, technology support, our central enrollment office. So all of those things that support, provide support. And then administration includes, and that's at 4.6% or about $5.8 million. So that includes the superintendent's office, it includes all of our principal offices at each building. So yeah, we're about 4.6% on administration. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the property tax levy, moving on to that, how you determining the levy, comparing it to the current year levy, looking at the changes and how it impacts taxpayers. That's the main reason for this hearing. So our property tax background, every owner of taxable property pays property taxes to various taxing jurisdictions, the county, city, school districts, special districts includes like the Met Council, So everyone pays taxes on, or property owners pay taxes on where the property is located. Each jurisdiction sets its own tax levy, again, especially, I know in our case, it's based on limits in state law. So each jurisdiction looks at the levy, determines the levy based on formulas. We submit that to the state, or I'm sorry, to the county actually, and the state in September. The county does some calculations. They send out the bills. They collect the taxes from property owners. And then as far as local property taxes, the county then sends that money to us. So you've all seen, this is a very generic property tax statement. You have likely all seen the proposed property tax statements that just went out actually in mid-November. So again, this is not the actual property tax statement, but it's the proposed based on what was submitted in September. It includes a comparison from the proposed for this next year to the current year. It's broken out by jurisdiction, so you can see, for instance, exactly what the school tax is and the change there. And then within the jurisdiction, it's broken out by what was voter approved, and then also what is the other is basically what's approved by the state, or what the state determines. And at the same time, that notice includes the time and place of the various public hearings. School district property tax, excuse me. Each school district may levy taxes in over 40 different categories. We have like a 40-page document that we need to review and enter data on, and that's what we spend a lot of August and September on, is determining that those calculations and our numbers are correct. Based on the funding formulas, and again calculated by the Department of Education and verified by locally, there's a maximum amount. A lot of this, as I mentioned, is because there are formulas that drive these things. So for each category, it is set by state law or local voter approval. That's the only way we receive funding in a school district. As far as the property tax process, there's some processes that we'll touch on, and in all of these different steps can also impact taxes on a particular parcel. So there can be various factors. So the first one is the city or county assessor determines for each parcel the estimated market value for each of the properties. So we can see increases in our estimated market value. Step two, the legislature, as I mentioned, sets the formulas. They set the formulas for tax capacity, meaning the rate at which parcels will be taxed, and then also there are school district levy limits. So they determine what comes from the state and what's going to come from property tax dollars. The county auditor then calculates the tax capacity for each parcel of property. And again, that's driven by market value and then total tax capacity in the district. Step four, the Minnesota Department of Education calculates detailed levy limits, not only for each school district, but based on the particular formulas that are approved by the legislature. So we've received those by category. Our school board adopted a proposed levy in September. This evening, after this public hearing, the board will adopt a final levy in December. That final levy cannot be more than our proposed levy that was adopted back in September, except for amounts if we had had a referendum, for instance, in November. That would be the only exception. So after the board approves the levy, we send that back to the county auditor, and they divide the final levy by the district's total tax capacity. to determine how much needs to be raised. And at that point, the property tax statements are prepared and sent out in, I believe, in March. So again, this is kind of a visual of the process. We received that information from MDE. We worked on that much of September. The board approved the proposed levy amount on September 26th. Property tax statements, proposed property tax statements rather, went out to all property tax owners. We have the hearing right now, and then this evening the board will certify the final levy amount. So let's take a look at what that proposed tax levy is. So the proposed payable 2024 tax levy is an increase from the current year of about $3.2 million, or 7.1%. There's a couple of categories and reasons for some of our bigger adjustments or changes. So this just gives a comparison by category as far as where we see changes. This breaks it out into category types. But one thing I will say is a lot of times when we see changes from one year to the next, I'm going to have you go looking at that general column, going midway down, prior year adjustments. We are always projecting things a year and a half ahead of time. Typically we like to see we like to see minimal adjustments. Again, our total levy is, in excess of $45 million. In the current year, we had adjustments of $4.9 million. We're looking at adjustments, we like to see that number less than that. We're looking at adjustments of about $3.4 million for this next year. One of the challenges we have had since COVID is projecting our enrollment. So we've really kind of backed off on that. But as we do our enrollment and submit our data and we receive funding for it, the state comes back and adjusts. So if we over-project enrollment, it won't happen this year, but it may happen a year from now, or 2 or 3 years from now. We don't retain that funding. So we do see some adjustments. So we've kind of become we have become more conservative in even projecting out some of our enrollment. We also get some adjustments sometimes from and that falls in the general fund, our long-term facility maintenance. We do a lot of projects that run over the course of a summer. Our fiscal year ends on June 30th. So sometimes, depending on how much construction is actually complete, we have to record things. We may record more expenses in 23, like June 30th of 23, for instance, or if payments are made or work is done in July of the following year, then it falls into that next fiscal year. So that can shift. That can shift a little bit also. But overall, we are looking at increasing the proposed levy from $45.6 million to $48.8 million. General fund, voter-approved operating referendum, we are anticipating an increase there of about $639,000. Some of that is due to the existing authority that we have that our voters approved includes an annual inflationary increase. So we do see additional funding there. And the state determines what that inflationary increase is. I believe it's in excess of 2%. It may be about 2.5% right now. I mentioned the general fund prior year adjustments. So we saw an increase, actually a decrease in our negative adjustments. So that is generating an additional $1.4 million, again, on those retroactive adjustments. Our debt service fund, this is where, as I mentioned, we paid off our existing debt. So we are seeing an increase there of about $746,000. We will be selling bonds this year to finance some of our long-term facility maintenance, and that has an impact on that. So that is an estimate, but it is included. So that impacts the overall levy. I want to spend just a couple minutes talking about the impact on individual taxpayer school taxes. So you can see an increase in your own property taxes based on several factors. The first one, it can be a change in the value of your property. Is that value going up? Is that value going down? Another factor is the changes in total value of all the property within the school district. And of course, our district covers 7 municipalities. So changes in property tax within the school, or in the total value within the school district. Obviously then also increases or decreases in levy amounts, and those can be caused by changes in state funding formulas, local needs and costs, in our case, it's state funding formulas and voter-approved referendums. So how does that impact each slice of the pie? So you can see the visual up there of the district's levy being the whole pie. So the higher market value that you have, that parcel will take on a bigger slice of the pie of the district's levy, and the lower market value then will take on a smaller slice. But each property owner will pay a portion of the pie. Let's talk a little bit more about property valuations. So we can have 2 properties in the district, and both houses are valued at $100,000. And this could be a house in Arden Hills and one in Roseville. But as far as the school district's taxes, if there's a total levy of, say, $500, and if this encompasses like the whole district, each property is going to pay $250. Again, because this is based on school district taxes. Impact of property valuations, looking at 2 properties in the district, and if those valuations change. If the orange house increases its value by 10% and the blue house increases its value by 25%, but we still have a total levy of $500, the orange house is going to pay less because the value, their slice of the pie is smaller, and the blue house is going to pay more. But the school district will still generate the same $500. Doesn't increase the revenue to the school district. So we try to look at multiple year comparisons on the levy. So we're going to take a look, and we have examples that are include the district taxes only, and then are shown based on no change, and then also a 14.4% increase in property value over the past 4 years. Because cumulatively, property values in the district, well, and I think we just used Roseville rather than each municipality, have increased 14.4%. So sometimes actual changes in value may be more or less for any parcel of property. We're just trying to give a fair representation of what happened to school district property taxes over this period. And these are based on preliminary estimates. Final amounts could change slightly. We never see big changes in the final. And Ellers presents us, we receive some of those property values estimates from Ellers, our district's municipal financial advisor. So here's taking a look from 21 to 24. If there were no changes in property value, I'm just going to touch on the residential. The commercial is up there as well, and also a copy of this whole presentation is on our website. But if, for instance, if we're looking at A home that's estimated, I'll go somewhere in the middle there, at $350,000. In 2021, the school taxes on that home was $1,666. In 2022, after passage of an operating levy by our taxpayers, that tax increased to $1,869. That last year, that actually dropped down to $1,626. And our estimated taxes for next year, for 2024, is $1,675. Again, assuming, so it's a slight increase from 23 to 24, but if you look at from 21 to 24, it's a very minor increase, and the taxes that are proposed for 2024 are actually at a lesser amount than what we had anticipated when we were going out for a referendum back in 2021. But this, of course, is also assuming that there's no changes in property value. And that, of course, property values do change. So this is, again, this is a demonstration based on no changes, and it just kind of illustrates the previous point and what's happened there. It's a visual for that. Again, some higher values. Now, let's take a look at estimated changes in school property taxes based on a 14.4% cumulative change. So we have seen the estimated market value increase, of course, over the last 4 years. There was a market value change from 2021 to 2022 of 1%. Property taxes or property values from 22 to 23 increased 10%. And now we're at 3% from 23 to 24. So those increases in property value also have an impact. So if you look at the home on the left here, the $250,000 residential property in 2021, that had it would have had a tax value then of $218,000. That tax value increases in 2022, 2023, and 2024. And then you can also see the corresponding increases that, and how that impacts, that change in value also impacts property taxes. I just would also like to share for the public that there are some state property tax refunds and deferral programs that are out there. The first one and most popular is a homestead credit refund. It's available for all homestead property, both residential and agricultural. It's done on a sliding scale. It's based on total property taxes and household income. The maximum that you can receive is $3,140 for homeowners, and this is also available for renters as well, and the cap there is $2,440. In addition, there's what's called a special property tax refund, and this applies if you see an increase, if there's a gross increase of 6% or $100 over the prior year, you qualify for this. And the refund you receive is 60% of the tax increase that exceeds the excess over 6%, or $100. The maximum you can receive for this is $2,500. And then the last program, this isn't a refund, this is a deferral. The state allows people 65 years of age or older with household income of $96,000 or less to defer a portion of property taxes on their home. And that deferred property taxes plus accrued interest must be paid when the home is sold or the homeowner dies. So again, that is not a refund, that is a deferral. But those are 3 programs that the state sponsors. So next steps, the board will accept public comments on the proposed levy. I will stand for questions, and then the board will certify the levy during the regular meeting.
For people who are watching online, please feel free to contact Sherry at the District Center. And she's more than happy to go over anything that has been discussed or wasn't discussed. I don't know what that would be, but great job. We do have folks who are here in person, so I'm going to take this opportunity. If there's anybody who has a question or questions, please feel free to ask those now. Okay. It looks like you did such a good job that there are no questions, so.
Or everyone's asleep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. In that case, with that, I will close this year's Truth in Taxation meeting. Thank you very much.